Good morning. Did you happen to see who was trending on Twitter today? Yeah, Bret Stephens was number 2 on my trending today on Twitter. Which, if you're not familiar with Bret Stephens, he's an opinion columnist for the New York Times. He has a conservative slant. He gets a lot of flack on the New York Times for having conservative viewpoints, being anti-global warming, or, I don't know, your standard conservative viewpoints. He's been on Bill Maher a few times. He's up there with Barry Weiss. But he was number 2 on my Twitter. And I was thinking like, oh, I wonder what he wrote this time. And the reason why he was number 2 on my Twitter, maybe it wasn't for years, Bret Stephens was trending on Twitter because he had reached out to an associate professor down in D.C. or somewhere who had called him a bedbug on Twitter. It's over a Twitter tussle. Bret Stephens is trending on Twitter because he had emailed an associate professor who had called him a bedbug on a tweet. And Bret Stephens had emailed back this professor who had written him a tweet that said, "Oh, Bret Stephens is a bedbug," and he had CC'd the provost, the associate professor's provost, challenging on this email that he wrote to the associate professor, saying, you say some very negative things. How would you like to come say that at my house in front of my wife and kids? I bet you would never say that. Open invitation to come say that to my face. And the associate professor, in his infinite wisdom, decided to post the email on Twitter for public display, saying, Bret Stephens just sent me an email, I guess, challenging me to a little boxing match in his living room, with the audience being his wife and kids. I guess they get free tickets. And he also CC'd my provost. And Bret Stephens promptly deleted Twitter. And then this morning, Bret Stephens appeared on MSNBC at a morning talk show host to talk about why he had deleted Twitter and the controversy around his email. And somebody delightfully did a little mashup of Bret Stephens at some commencement speech that he gave at a college 2 years ago. And what he said this morning.
Get out of your own safe spaces. Define what your intellectual comfort zone is and leave it. Enhance your tolerance for discordant voices.
A professor at George Washington University described me as a bedbug or a metaphorical bedbug. And I think that kind of rhetoric is dehumanizing and totally unacceptable no matter where it comes from.
Define what your intellectual comfort zone is and leave it.
Essentially what he said this morning is, I just think we should have a level of civility on the internet that we would have in real life. Now, I'm down with what he said on paper. Like, that makes sense to me, Bret Stephens. I'm game for maintaining the same level of civility on the internet as we would have in real life. Lord knows, Twitter is definitely a cesspool. But what cracks me up is the interlaced cut somebody had done between him talking about his opposition to safe spaces on campus and that First Amendment speech should be protected at all costs. And here he is now, on the morning show. Well, he just used dehumanizing language. He dehumanized me by calling me a bedbug. The juxtaposition is hilarious. And the first initial reaction that you may have, I'll be honest, is, wow, Bret Stephens is a little. But don't get me wrong, I like a good contrarian. I love me a Christopher Hitchens or a Hemingway figure. Kind of a booze-drinking, cig-smoking, devil may care, here are my opinions, I'm going to write about them, I don't care. Mother Teresa, scumbag. Bill Clinton, scumbag. It doesn't matter what you think. I'm going to go smoke cigars with Fidel Castro. What you going to do about it? I can get down with that level of sincere contrarianism. But the fact that he's CCing provosts on people he disagrees with, I guess we're supposed to infer that, this teacher should be reprimanded for using negative language, makes me think like, well, this guy's turns out to be a little weasel. And that's what gets me to what I think is really occurring. And it has to do with a psychological term called fundamental attribution error. And fundamental attribution error is essentially the fact that we attribute negative aspects of other people to their character. When somebody cuts us off on the freeway, we think, man, that person is a total prick. They are totally selfish. They're not self-aware. What an idiot. But when we cut somebody off on the freeway, do we attribute our negative actions to character? No, we attribute them often to circumstance. My kid's late for the recital. I'm trying to get to this doctor's appointment. I'm late to meet my grandmother for this appointment. I'm sorry, it's not like me. Just deal with it, my man. I gotta cut you off. And that's the fundamental attribution error. It's the human bias to attribute failures by other people to the character and failures on our part to circumstance. When in reality, often the decisions people make are based on the environment they are in at the time. And so, if we were to really think more complexly about the situation and give Bret Stephens the benefit of the doubt, knowing the fundamental attribution error that is so ingrained in our psychology, what really probably happened? Why is Bret Stephens acting like this? One, so hypocritically, it seems like, and two, so feebly that he's deleting Twitter and getting up there talking about how being called a bedbug is dehumanizing. My suspicion is that the environment he works in is pretty tough. He is a conservative opinion columnist for the New York Times. And the New York Times, internally, is full of pretty left-leaning people. And so most of his colleagues probably either, if they don't dislike him, even more so, they probably resent him. There's probably a lot of cross emails, cross chatter. Why is Bret Stephens writing this? Why is the New York Times still employing him? What are you saying and we factually disagree with? There's probably a lot of inner resentment. He probably works in an environment where a lot of people, a lot of his coworkers and colleagues don't like him. That's tough. That's tough. Taking criticism on the inside's tough. But if you were to lay that on top of all the emails that you may get yourself, especially as a public figure, which a New York Times opinion columnist is a public enough figure that they're getting hate mail. They're getting the emails, the hate emails, go die, you should donate your salary to somebody else, you don't deserve it. All those things. And when they add up day after day after day, the external criticism and the internal sniping and criticism, maybe you want to lash out. Maybe you want to start employing the same tactics that get deployed against you, sending nasty emails, CCing your editor. You're going to do it to the associate professor because you're just sick of it. The environment has forced you into a bad headspace. And that's most likely what occurred. The fall of Bret Stephens isn't with a bang, it's with a whimper, to quote T.S. Eliot, as is so often the human condition. It's not really about character, it's about the environment and the system the human is operating in. For better or for worse, a lot of human action and motivation is based on what the system is incentivizing or de-incentivizing. In this case, I think the system for Bret Stephens is probably pretty toxic. He's probably disliked, especially in his own company. And what does that mean? Well, maybe that means he's not right for the job if he can't mentally take the negativeness around him and it causes him to lash out like this and then delete his Twitter and then get on, the local DC, New York cable news morning talk show host and tell this pity tour. Maybe you shouldn't be an opinion columnist for the New York Times, my man. But I don't think it shows a total lack of character. I think it's really the fundamental attribution error that's at play here. Just some thoughts. Agree, disagree. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, like, comment, share, subscribe. We go all over the place here. We talk about niche Twitter politics in New York, the DC elite, and psychology. It is what it is. I don't know. These are my thoughts. Thanks for watching. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.